It is 6:30. We have a quorum, so we will call the meeting to order. If you'd please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Charles.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for this beautiful day and for the sunshine. And I thank you for letting us be a part of a great city and community. And I just pray that as we make decisions tonight, that you would help us to make the decisions that are right for our district. I pray that you would bless our kids and continue to keep us safe. And I just want to thank you for all that you do for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Sean.
And Mr. Westbrook is going to read our mission.
Mission of GISD. The mission of Gatesville Independent School District, a portal to limitless possibilities, is to empower our students to be life-ready knowledge seekers and problem solvers by instilling leadership, innovation, integrity, critical thinking, and service through challenging and engaging learning experiences facilitated by passionate teachers and supported by caring parents and community members.
Well, tonight we have our student spotlight like normal, but Bridget Register is at a conference, but we're in good hands. Elise Tobias is here. She just so happens to be Teacher of the Month, and she has a young man that she's wanting to honor. So Elise, if you want to come on up and tell us a little bit about the family.
Can I bring him up with you?
You bet, come on up. Yeah, that's right.
He just got done. I've selected Nathaniel McCaskill for our student spotlight. Nathaniel is a kindergarten student at the Gatesville Primary. Nathaniel joined my class in November. Prior to entering kindergarten, he had received homeschooling. Nathaniel comes to school each and every day eager to learn. He is an exceptional student both in academics and citizenship, always setting positive examples for his peers. He is diligent in completing his work. I always tell my students that I don't expect perfection, but I do expect them to do their best. And Nathaniel gives me his best each and every day. He is kind and respectful, not only to his teachers, but to his fellow classmates. Outside of school, Nathaniel enjoys playing with his friends, playing soccer, and snuggling with his mom.
Well, Nathaniel, we're proud of you, and we're proud of your teacher, Ms. Tobias. And we hope that you keep up the good work, and we want to take your picture now up here with everybody. Is that okay if we take your picture? So let's give you a certificate, too. And we want to take several pictures. Nathaniel, come on up here. Come on up here. Alicia, come on. Do you want to hold it? There you go. That's yours now.
All right, tied up. We're snuggling. You good?
All right. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
You be the leader, let them follow you, and do the right thing, so I'm how to do it.
I hope you win your next game.
Yeah.
Now we're moving on to Teacher Spotlight. Who's phone?
Tonight during our teacher spotlight, I just wanted to take some time to recognize Tina Kennedy and our fine arts program and the amazing job that she has done basically from the very beginning, because she implemented, we started out with a music program and she expanded that to be a full-blown fine arts program that gives our students so many different opportunities in fine arts. They participate in art theory, art appreciation, art history, same thing with music. They get hands-on experiences with ukuleles and drums, lots and lots of singing. She just incorporates all of that together with an appreciation and gives them opportunities that I don't know that they would really have other places. So she is pretty amazing. I've always thought that. Today we were laughing back and forth about trying to figure out how many years she's been in elementary school. And she said, well, when was that you came to my house? And she called me to come teach at elementary. And I think we narrowed it down. Thank goodness we have your children to use as a reference. But in 2006, she came to elementary as a 3rd grade teacher and then moved into fine arts. And she's also serves our ukulele club. Our 3rd graders serves as great ambassadors throughout the community. They have lots of different gigs during the springtime. They play in a lot of different places. So she brings a lot of notoriety to our campus and does it all and makes it look very, very easy. So we thank you, Tina, for making us look so good.
My kids have had Tina, and Tina's not just an excellent teacher, she's an excellent person. So it's a great selection. We want to give you a nice G. We'll take your picture.
She wasn't crossing, right? With that hand though.
That's right.
Look, there's Keegan in her camera.
That's
Plenty right.
Thank
you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job. Diana would be proud of that.
Very well.
Now we have our public comments. Are there any persons who'd like to speak back? We'll skip that. Moving on to the consent agenda, do we need to pull any of these items before we vote? Any questions? Do I hear a motion to accept the consent agenda? Rob? Second, David? Any discussion? All in favor, push hand. None opposed. Okay, thank you. Motion carries. And then we're ready for the bond section.
Well, Mr. Frazier has invited some guests, some special guests tonight to give us some information on the potential a bond. You know, we've been talking a lot the past few months about high school renovation, and it's predicted to have a price tag that may need a bond to go with it. Some out of the fund balance and some through bond. So, Mr. Frazier, if you want to come on up and then introduce your guests.
Good evening, members of the board.
Good evening.
It's a beautiful evening. I hope you've had a great month. Tonight we do have a couple special guests from the Dallas area. One is with Capital and works in the bond area. This individual helped us with our previous bonds that we issued with the elementary school. We actually issued two $9.5 million bonds for that school. One in December of one year and the other one in January of the other year. So we stay within that $10 million threshold where you get a better rate. So Brian Grubbs is here tonight from Plano, and he's going to tell you all about it. This is your time to ask questions about the timeline. And he asked me about the amount. I just said, well, just round it off at 9.5, because it looks like maybe a little extra padding may be needed. So we were talking 9, so he's going to present tonight 9.5 for your review. And then following him will be Mike Holmberg, and he's the marketing director with WRA. He's the reason why WRA is with us, because he's the one that designed, his team designed that beautiful RFQ that really impressed us all. And then Mary O'Brien, I don't know if the rest of the board has met Mary O'Brien, that's the lady next to him, and she's the architect design person that is working with us on the design of the high school renovation. So without any further ado, I think it's yours, Brian. Appreciate you coming down.
Yeah. Good. Thank y'all. If you want to. As we pass the presentations around, again, just to reintroduce myself, Brian Grubbs with Samco Capital Markets, financial advisor to Texas Schools. We represent over 100 Texas schools. My partner and I do, and we've been doing this for almost 17 years now. So we have some of the largest school districts in the state of Texas and some of the smallest. So what I want to do this evening, I know we're discussing in March something for a potential November election, which the board does not have to take official action until August. So everything is very preliminary and subject to change as you move forward the planning process. So with that, let's turn behind tab 1 and get an idea of where our interest rate market is. One of the assumptions that we make in the analysis that we'll talk about in a moment is what are our interest rates, what are our borrowing costs. So on page 1, you'll see a chart called the Bond Buyers Index of Municipal Bonds. This is an index that updates weekly. It's a national index. You can see to the far right, this particular index, this past Friday, updated at 3.92%. But just note, over the last few weeks, we've started to see a rundown in interest rates. The 3.92 relative to this index, from a perspective going back all the way to January 2001, the average in this index is a 432. So we are still borrowing at very low interest rates in our Texas public school market. On page 2, I want to look at 2 actual Texas ISD school district yield curves or rate comparisons. Now what I've done here is on the left, I've put a rate comparison for school districts that commit to issue $10 million or less in a calendar year, running January 1 to December 31. This is something that this district took advantage of when you last sold bonds, as Mr. Frazier pointed out, compared to the yields and rates on the right, which is a large issue or $10 million or greater. So what we have on the left, if you look at the 4th column, you'll see a yield to maturity, and it ranges anywhere from a 1.59 all the way down to a 3.62. Well, if you compare that same column to the very far right for an issuer that issues more than $10 million in a calendar year, we're still at the 1.59, but you'll see out there on the 30-year yield, it's a 3.76. What I have highlighted here in yellow are the years in which there is a difference, meaning a lower interest rate for school districts that commit to issue less than $10 million. As you well know, when we did the last bond election, we issued a portion of that at the end of one calendar year, came back the following, the early portion, and captured 2 bank qualified bond sales at ultimately a lower average interest rate, which is an option for you. Obviously, if we're talking about the $9 to $9.5 million, we would not need to break that up. But as you continue to plan, if for whatever reason the planning exceeds that, what we did last time still is an option for you. All right, behind tab 2 on page 1 is a look at the district's outstanding voted bond debt service profile. You only have the 2 outstanding series of bonds. Column 1 represents your fiscal year ending beginning 2019 down through 2034 when the bonds are retired completely. Column 2 represents the first series of bonds that were sold out of the last election. And then column 3 is the second series that we followed up when the calendar flipped to 2014. Column 4 represents your aggregate payment. What I do want to point out under column 2, and there's a footnote, that there is the ability as a district to refinance these bonds and or use any excess to begin paying down principal. The reason we have not is because the interest rates under column 2 range from a 1.3 to a 3.2%. So we really can't justify refinancing these bonds and saving you any money, so we're leaving those outstanding. Now keep in mind, if at any point in time you want to begin paying off a portion of those, you can do so. Under column 2, you'll see in red a date August 15th of 2023. These bonds do not become callable until 2023. So as we get closer to that date, to the extent that interest rates are lower than what we locked in with this series of bonds, we'll be monitoring that on your behalf regardless of what you do with the bond election in the future to potentially save you money and or paying off principal. Tab 3 is a look at your historical statistics and growth assumptions. The bottom line behind this spreadsheet is this is my roadmap for serving you as a financial advisor in building this scenario that we'll talk about in a moment. So everything in blue here is an actual number. Anything in red is because we're either in the current fiscal year and or it's an assumption that we're making that will go into the scenario that we'll talk about in just a moment. So under column 1, you'll see your fiscal year ending going all the way back to 2005, 2006. Column 2 represents your net taxable value. This is a very important assumption. If you look back in 2005, 2006, the total taxable value for the district was around $372 million. If you follow under column 3, these are the growth percentages that you've seen here with your tax base. You have had years of substantial growth, but you have also had years, just like every other Texas school district during those recessionary years, where we had very modest 1% to 2% type growth. Where you're at currently in 2018-9, in between the solid black lines, is about $777 million. That represents over the last 2 years about a 3.5% to 3% growth. That is the baseline assumption for the scenario that we'll talk about in a moment. I'm assuming going forward, just for the next 3 years, that you continue at a pace of approximately 3%. After that 3rd year, I'm assuming the tax base stops growing, not because I believe that it will, but just because it gives you the opportunity to continue to manage the tax rate that you propose to the voters if you decide to move forward, and or it gives you the ability that in 2 to 3 years, if you have another project that you need to address, you'll have the capacity to do so. Column 5 is to look at your average daily attendance. This is also an assumption that we make in terms of our bond model. The importance with the average daily attendance assumption, as well as the column 8 assumption, which is our comptroller value, is it's these 2 figures that determine whether a Texas school district is receiving state assistance to help you make your bond payment or not. The bottom line here is the TEA each and every year takes column 8, divides it by column 5, and comes up with a wealth per ADA statistic. That's identified under column 11. The cutoff for the receipt of state assistance is $35, okay? So where you are at currently, if you look under column 11, is for the tax base that you have, the number of students reflected in your ADA of about 2551, you're at $29.43. So you are property poor in terms of the state assistance on the INS side, and therefore they are helping you make some of your bond payments. But note, as you continue to grow in tax base, should your student count not grow, you are getting closer and closer to 35 each and every year. The bottom line here is that as your tax base grows, the state sees it that you're getting more local collections, so you need less help from them on the state assistance side. If that trend were to reverse itself and the tax base were to decline, and you get lower than $35, then your state assistance would pick up. It's something they calculate each and every year, and it's designed to help you manage the INS tax rate, not put you in a bind. Columns 12, 13, and 14 is your tax rate history. You're currently at the $1.04 with an INS tax rate of 13.7. Then we've got in 15, 16, 15 represents your INS fund balance, which is healthy, and we'll talk more about that and the potential use for that. This is essentially your savings account that you can only use to make, help you make bond payments. This money cannot be used for anything else. You have a healthy INS fund balance going into this. To the extent that you never do anything with bonds moving forward, which I know is unlikely, this money can only be used for debt service, so anything outstanding, you can use some of those funds to begin paying off some of the debt we've already talked about. Column 16 is your general fund balance. You'll have an extremely healthy general fund balance. The state typically likes to see 2 to 3 months of operating. Most of the school districts we work with like to see 2 to 3 months. The rating services that we go before when a district sells bonds like to see 2 to 3. So the fact that you're talking about a project where you finance a portion of it and use some of the general fund money as a portion of it is very wise, and you have the ability to do so based on what y'all done here as a district. All right, column 4 represents the actual scenario. And again, just keep in mind, we're talking in March. I know that the conversations will continue, and we will obviously continue to update the scenarios as you move forward into your planning process through the month of August as you approach the deadline and call for the election. But on page 1 is just a summary of what we're discussing today, and that is looking at a $9.5 million successful election in November of 2019. We've assumed a 20-year amortization at a 4% interest rate. A couple things about that. The 4% interest rate on a 20-year term is very conservative to today. A 30-year bond that's currently being sold in the market is less than 4%. But we're talking in March for an election that happens in November for bonds that are not sold with the successful election until January. So we've got quite a bit of time that we need to build in a lot of cushion. We do that because we assume interest rate and tax base and student count. If for whatever reason we miss on one, we've got some fallback in the other. That's why we're being very conservative at the 4%. In addition to the 20-year term, legally school districts can pay bonds off as long as up to 40 years. That is not anything I will ever recommend that you do. What I like to do is try to find a term that fits in line with not only your outstanding bonds, but also the projects that you're financing. And I think for purposes of the discussion today, 20 years is a good starting point. As you move forward, I can also show you the difference in 15 years, 25 years, and or 30 years, so you can see the difference. Obviously, the shorter the term, the higher the potential INS tax rate, versus extending it out, having a lower tax rate, but having the bonds outstanding for a little longer. What we've summarized here in the middle are the assumptions that we've talked about. We're assuming that the tax base grows at 3% for 3 years and remains constant after that. We've held the ADA assumption at 2551 constant, and then we're assuming the use of a portion of that INS fund balance that we just looked at, and I'll show you more of that in the cash flows. But the bottom line here is that a $9.5 million election in the bar in the middle, you can see that that would require, highlighted in yellow, approximately a 9-cent increase above your current INS tax rate of 13.7 cents. So it would take you, beginning in the 2020-21 school year, up to approximately a 22.7 cent INS tax rate. To put that in perspective, there's a chart here at the bottom that communicates what that looks like to homeowners. And this is the type of information that when a school district and a board acts to call for an election, this is the type of information we prepare and help put into the information items that go to the community. What this chart reflects is various home values from as low as 50,000 up to 400,000 in increments of 50,000, and it puts a 9-cent increase on that. So for example, let's just use a $100,000 home. A $100,000 home is taxed as if it's worth $75,000 because you do have the $25,000 state mandated exemption. When you put a 9-cent increase on that home, that would allow you to sell $9.5 million worth of bonds for the school. That homeowner's projected annual increase in their tax bill is $67.50 a year, or $5.63 per month. So you can go in and identify, anyone in the community can identify their home value and use this chart to help them better understand how much of a monthly impact this is going to be for them to support whatever bond issue that you propose in November. Highlighted in red at the bottom, something that's very important too for any individual that's 65 years of age and older who has taken it upon themselves to turn in their paperwork to have their taxes frozen, that a bond election does not affect their tax bill on their primary residence.
Question on that.
Yes, sir.
We had an argument about that. It does not affect the valuation, it affects the effective tax rate, is that correct? The freeze does not freeze the value that the assessor...
It does not, that's right, it does
Okay.
not freeze the value, it freezes the bill. Now, that homeowner, should they do any improvements, can impact the dollar amount, but the primary residence, as it's presented to the appraisal district in that year, is frozen at a certain dollar amount for school tax rate purposes. So the 9-cent increase would not raise your tax bill. Good question, I get it all the time.
We've had that discussion.
Absolutely. So on page 2, let's just look at the cash flows for this scenario. Under column 1, you've got your fiscal year ending beginning 2019 out to 2040. Column 2 represents the outstanding debt service that we've already looked at. These are the 2 series of bonds that are outstanding. Column 3 represents the estimate of what the debt service would look like for $9.5 million if we borrowed at an interest rate of 4%. So column 4 would be your combined total payment, all right? So 5 and 6 is the estimate of the amount of state aid that the TEA will send you to help you make your bond payment, not only for the outstanding bonds, but also the new. It's reflected under column 5 for the IFA program, column 6 for the EDA program. These are the only 2 programs where you can get state assistance on the INS side. This is it. And as long as you stay at $35 or less, you will be in this program. But if you'll note, the amount of money that you're receiving each and every year, it goes down in this scenario because the tax base is growing and you're collecting more locally, so you're receiving less from them. Column 7 is my number. It's just a plug number for how you could potentially use some of that INS fund balance that you have. I think we're estimating around $550,000 is currently in that account. You can use those annually as needed to help you manage the INS tax rate, meaning if you propose a $9.5 million bond election, tell the voters that the increase is going to be 9 pennies. Any given year, if we maybe are below the projection or ahead of it, you can use those funds to help you manage that. And in some cases, you may have the luxury, because you have a large amount, to potentially may not need all 9 pennies even if they approve it, if that makes sense. So then under column 10, you'll see the tax base value growth assumptions, and then most importantly under column 11, this is where we see the INS tax rate going up from 13.7 cents up to the 22.5, representing the 9-cent increase. It holds there until 2034, at which time our outstanding bonds are paid off, so you'll see a substantial drop in that after those bonds are paid off. Are there any questions on the cash flows? Again, this is I would characterize this as a very early, preliminary, conservative look in terms of interest rate, in terms of tax base growth, but again, I know that y'all are beginning the conversations on the planning. Just wanted to give you an idea as to what this type of scenario looks like. Ultimately, before the board takes action by the deadline in August, you will have already received another preliminary value from the appraisal district for your next fiscal year, 1920, going in, as well as a certified value. So if we see 3 to 4% growth in next year's value before you call for the election, we can adjust that so that 9 cents may come down, in addition to making any adjustments on the interest rates. Any questions on the cash flows for the scenario? Okay. Tab 5 is a look at our bond election timetable. School districts are given 2 opportunities, May and November of each year. They can hold a bond election. Your next available opportunity is November 5th of 2019. You'll see towards the top of the page, the deadline to call for the election, meaning the board must take official action, has to be on or before August of 19. We will have districts that will call in July. We will have districts that call in August. We don't want to call for it too soon because we do have, once you call for it, there's going to be a lot of communication that needs to be done to the voters. From the deadline up through voting, you still have a pretty substantial amount of time from mid-August till they go to the polls to communicate what it is you're doing. We don't want to add an extra 2 or 3 months because then all the buzz can sometimes seem to die down before it's time to actually vote. So early voting begins October 21st, runs through November the 1st, and then you've got the election date on November the 5th. Districts that choose not to call for it in November of 19 carry forward into May of 20, and that deadline is typically mid-February. Tab 6, real quick, I'm not going to cover all of this because I think most of us here remember the process from the last bond election. In addition to, it sounds like based on your conversations already at this point, you have a pretty good idea of what you want. These are just some bullet point types of considerations that districts go through as far as a facility and capital improvement process, where you have obviously in the crowd tonight your architects here to assist. We've talked about the state assistance implications. The one thing that I always want to point out in this is we get the question all the time, why can't we just save up and do the entire project, right? Well, the reason that we don't in terms of bonds when we're talking about facilities that are going to be here a long time is because if you had the ability, which very few districts have the ability to save up $15 to $20 million and put into a project, you're using those taxpayers' dollars that live here today to finance or pay for with cash a facility that's going to be here for a very long time. The reason we bond finance something is because of the individuals that live here today pay their portion in addition to the individuals that move in 5, 10, 15, 20 years pay their portion that are going to use this facility. So the burden is not carried on those living here to pay for something that's going to be around for a very long time. And then lastly, under column 7, and this is more that you can look through after the fact, but I know in some of the conversations with the district, we always put together these statistics. The bottom line for the state of Texas is the majority of years, over the past 5 or 6 years, it's been around 100 to 120 Texas school bond elections are held each and every year. I would say 2/3 of those are conducted in May, probably 1/3 of those in November. It used to be that May was a time period that benefited state aid districts. That's no longer really the case. So I think May is more of a convenience in terms of that's when they're planning. But by and large, over the last few years, the pass rate has been around 70 to 75% in whole for the entire calendar year. Now, I would say one other point is that most school districts that have a bond election, which I think ties into what you're talking about doing in terms of your project, do so as a single proposition, meaning when you've identified that your $9.5 million is going to complete a certain project, you have on that ballot as one item to vote yes or no to, compared to some other districts that potentially have 2 separate propositions that just doesn't really apply here. And in fact, the very few that do that only do that when there is some type of a controversial item added to the list of projects. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have for me this evening.
Who had the $1 billion one?
The $1 billion bond election?
Yeah.
Well, we've had, right now, Prosper ISD is proposing for May of this year $1.3 billion. But I think that the last $1 billion could have been Dallas or Houston. But yeah, we've got a $1.3 billion election.
tax base.
Prosper.
Cy-Fair's the one for 1.7.
Yeah.
Cy-Fair. Houston.
Cy-Fair.
But you know, a lot of times in those districts, even though it's a very large number, Prosper's INS tax rate cannot go up. Even though they're asking for 1.3 billion, they're at the cap, and so they're just having to grow into being able to sell it, but they're growing so fast that they're able to do that over a 7 to 10 year period.
I'm glad they have that.
Yeah, lots of plans.
Do you come across very many districts who pay for half of it and then just want half the total from the city?
I would
or from the
say that
district?
very few districts have the ability to do that.
So we're kind of,
And so I think that that's a positive because that you can. Now, I do have districts that have large general fund balances that choose to do that very thing. I have a district down in the Houston area that carries about 50 to 60% of their operating budget in general fund. When they did their bond election, although it was a larger bond election, they identified all of their projects and said, okay, we know the total here. We want to use this much of our general fund and not ask the voters for this and finance the rest of it. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in doing what you're doing and being able to pay for it. Because even using half of your, I'm just my numbers, say you used half of that, that still keeps you at a level that is above what you need in terms of the rating services eyes and or the state to be considered healthy. So it's a unique and fortunate situation that you're in to be able to do that.
any questions? Anybody?
Brad, that was very informative, good information. I think we need to know, and it will help us present it to the community because they're the ones that ultimately have to decide.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be back.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Be careful on the way home. Long road.
Gerald, you want to introduce our next presenter?
Mike Holmberg.
Okay, good evening. I like to have a chime when I walk in.
Walking in music.
Tonight I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm Michael Holmberg with WRA Architects. I help school districts just like yourself do on not only the pre-bonding but also going through the bond process. My goal is to help you inform the electorate of exactly what's going into your bond campaign. That's one of the services we do at WRA. Before we get into that, I just want to kind of talk a little bit about some data here. Kind of goes with Brian's a little bit. But this is actually the impact of, in 2018, of every bond in Texas, every school district bond. And you can see kind of this line right there, about 22 cents, you start to see quite a few failures. So that's really good news in terms of if you go for a 9.5 cents, you're in a really strong position for passage. A lot of things I'm going to talk about tonight, obviously y'all have gone through a bond campaign not long ago with a very high percentage passage rate, almost 80%, which is absolutely fantastic, shows a lot of support for the school district, and we want to replicate on that success. Now, a lot of times we start talking about INS impact, the general voters, really that doesn't resonate with them, so you start talking about what does it actually impact them on a monthly basis. And we use $150,000 home value for this, and this is all 2018 data as well. And you can see where you would be at, and I believe Daryl, if I'm right, wrong, it's about for $150,000 home, but 9.5 cents would be about $9 to $10 impact. So again, you're in a very strong position of passage success by just looking at the statistics of 2018. Now, you might ask, what does that look like longer term? Well, it's really consistent. If you look at over the last couple of years, that break point, if you will, is about 20 cents, where you start to see more failures over an INS impact of 20 cents or more. That's where you start to see more failures than passage. And same goes with a $150,000 home value. Once you start getting that $20 to $25 mark amount, you really start to see a lot of failures in bond elections. Brian also mentioned kind of the passage rate on May versus November. It's about 75%. That's pretty consistent across the board. I get a lot of school districts ask me if it's advantageous to do a May bond versus a November, and really Texas is very consistent in that over the last couple of years. So tonight, some of the tools we're going to talk about may not apply. I want to offer kind of a menu of services that we do. You know your community, you know how the best to get this information out to them and what will work and won't work. So I'm just going to kind of tell you exactly what services we offer, and then really as we get into the bond planning, that July and August time frame, we can really pinpoint exactly how we want to tailor this. I always kind of mention that every bond election is the exact same, but totally different. So this is just, one of the things that we do is we look at kind of voter mapping. We put your voters into 3 different categories. Not you're registered but non-voting. Your voting, active voter, of basically saying they've been voting in the last, they voted in the last 3 elections or one of those last elections, and then you're over 65 voter, which is also a high propensity voter. Again, this is a great tool for us to really identify exactly how we can get this information out to the voters and what information we're going to be providing them. Once we have all of the information gathered, so not only from our architecture team, but your finance team, we'll gather all this and build one website for it. We build this standalone so we don't lose the information that's basically your day-to-day operation of your school district. We don't want to interfere with that. So we'll have its own unique URL, and we'll have all the information about the bond. So the scope, any photos and videos, all the voting information, all your FAQs, any events that we might have, and then all the photos and videos. And this will continue to update. So especially the FAQ is one of the highest hit pages on this. So as information comes in and questions from the community, we'll put those questions there and then an answer for them, and then slowly roll those out as well. We use this kind of as the hub of the information. So this will have a very easy, GISD2019.com, something very easy and recognizable to get to. I'll also mention that it's a very easy site to get through, because we really want any level of technology so that this information is very easy to absorb, so they're very educated about what's going into the process. Now, throughout the bond campaign, we build a full kind of what I call a layered communication plan. So that is week by week breakdown of exactly what's going to happen. We work with your team to develop that plan so that not only you know what's going on and what information is being put out there, but also the district can really kind of tailor-make it to exactly how we want this information to go out. So it might be week 1, website goes live, press release issued, flyer built, things like that, and then going throughout the weeks of, hey, we're reaching out to these civic organizations, PTO, local churches, and really kind of, again, layering that communication. So it might be a email blast going out, or a text update, a social media post. Everybody absorbs different information different ways. I always use my parents and my in-laws as my test case. Both my parents and in-laws want something mailed to them. They want to see it in their hands, read it about the bond, and then they'll go vote. Something comes in the mail for me, it goes immediately in the trash. I will look on social media. That's how I get my information. So everybody's different. We want to reach everybody as we possibly can. So that's again, a full plan will be built prior to that. Video has become extremely important in bond elections. It's very easy to share on social media. We can make these about a minute, minute and a half, a little animation that really tells exactly the ins and outs of what's going into a bond campaign. And this is just a really brief one. I'll just not play the entire time, but this is for actually a $7.5 million campaign up in Chillicothe, which is on the northwest side of the, well, 3 hours outside now.
On May 4th, 2019, voters in Chillicothe ISD will have an opportunity to decide on a $7.5 million bond program. What is a school bond? A school bond is like a home mortgage. Districts must borrow the money for capital projects, including construction, renovation, and other improvements. Voters give the district permission to take out a loan and pay it back over an extended period of time. Bonds cannot be used for salaries or operating costs, such as utility bills, supplies, building maintenance, fuel, or insurance.
Social media, I'm sure y'all working in a public entity are really happy about social media. It's a great proactive tool to get information out there. However, it does allow for disinformation to be spread, or false information, or a vote no. So one of the things that we really monitor is what's being said out there. I want to know if there's a disinformation campaign that we can just respond to it, that we can put the facts out there. We find this just very important, that going through this day and age, just to keep track of very diligently through this process. And we actually help build lots of graphics to post on social media, just so we can continue to update and always kind of push that narrative forward of what's going on in the bond. If a political action committee does decide to form for the bond, we donate our time, so we kind of help them build graphics, websites, flyers, whatever they need. A lot of times, folks haven't gone through a campaign lately, they don't know all the kind of rules and ethics that go into a bond campaign, or the paperwork, so we just kind of act as a resource for them if they decide to form. This is just a quick video on play that we use for testimonials, basically. After the bond is passed, our team doesn't stop working for you. We want to kind of showcase exactly what's going on in the bond. So my team gets together and does these bond update videos, so it'll be drone updates or walkthroughs of the projects. Again, like Brian mentioned, this won't be your last bond campaign. So we want to kind of build on that growth and that history and showcase exactly what's going into a bond. So we find these are really popular, just to educate not only the board of what the progress is, but your team, but also the general public. And with that, I'll turn over any questions y'all may have, and I appreciate y'all's time.
On the social media side of things, I'm assuming you have someone or several someones who actively monitor what's going on in that process.
Absolutely.
And as you said, respond as necessary.
Right. And typically, when the law will be posted to the district page. So we help respond, craft responses. But again, a lot of stuff will be posted on probably other pieces. So if there's a vote yes page, or even sometimes local civic groups, they'll post things on there. So we really kind of track that and put a lot of keywords out there. So if something's posted about the bond, we can respond accordingly, because we know that's going to happen. Great question.
Anybody?
Maybe a question for y'all, actually. You know, during the last campaign was very successful. Was there some things in particular that y'all felt were assets that y'all did that really kind of helped move that ball forward, or something that, again, like I said, there's always particular things.
We got one board member that was here before.
Yeah.
Everybody else is new since then.
The group of community people who got on board to help with it, and Mr. Ward, I believe, was the chairman of that committee, and he went, and several of them went to different groups and spoke, and that was really helpful. And a lot of people were involved at that point, and that helped spread it out more than just the people here at school or more than just us. Everybody's got to have a part to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what you do. I mean, you're going to talk to us about having this group.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll help, like I said, help organize, do paperwork, all the type of things that help go into that. And really, again, building all the tools that you need to go out there and talk to. So it's flyers or all those little tools that go into it is really important. So you're just armed with all the answers.
The more community members who want to get involved in that, the better it's going to be.
Absolutely.
So we want a big one.
Yeah, and really, y'all know those people that need to be on that committee, right?
Yeah.
So it's really targeting those folks that have a constituency that have been here for a number of years, that really kind of know the pulse of the community, are really important to have on there so they can go out and talk about it.
Mike, I was just a parent at the time of the elementary bond, and the most telling thing for me was the tour of the existing school and what poor condition it was in. That was really the deciding factor for me as a parent, that something needed to be done. And so I think that's another good option or tool. But you presented a lot of great ideas, you know, that reaches folks that use all different types. I think that was a great example about your in-laws and your parents. A mailer versus social media, you know, to make sure you reach everybody.
Absolutely. Again, ultimately, my goal is that anybody walking into the voter booth, yes or no, is just educated about the bond. That's my ultimate goal for you. Thank you.
Mike, we appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've left that before.
I just put that on Facebook.
No.
You're welcome to stay, Mike, or you can.
No.
Okay.
Did you want to say anything? We're
Well,
glad you're here first.
thanks. I'm happy to be here. We are currently working through the design, and at the April board meeting is when I'm going to present what we've kind of decided on a team and make a recommendation to you as the board to hopefully approve.
We had a laundry list of things that were from small to a little bit moderate changes, and Mary met all those needs. We looked at it today at length for a couple of hours, and we're very impressed with what she did, everything we asked her to do. And so there's just little bitty things now, very minuscule things, and we want it to be ready for April for you guys to view.
Yeah.
But after we look at it one more time and then have the faculty look at it, it should be ready for you guys' viewings.
Yeah, and at that time, so Masonic is the construction manager who's already been approved to be part of the project, and they can also present a cost estimate at that time as well. Just remember, it is an estimate, and we won't know the final price till bid day, but so you can also gauge where we stand on the design and have that price moving forward, in at least the estimate. So,
Mary, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
She's
you.
done a lot of hard work on this project.
so I'm excited to be here.
So you guys stay a couple more hours.
Yeah.
We understand. You
Thank y'all again for coming.
Very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank y'all so much.
Drive safe.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Worthington. Marcia.
They should have stayed. This is going to be good.
Oh, this is gonna be great. I told Pam, I said, I never believed that I would be the age that my home value or whatever would be frozen, you know, and still be working here. And to get the explanation of a bond, and Pam and I just said, that really is good. I can.
It was good.
So I think from an email or letter y'all received, someone asked questions about our, it's BEC local, our leave policy. The last time that y'all looked at our leave, or it was updated, or the DEC local was 12/2/2016. And I think that then what the board did I think most of that change had to do with how many discretionary leave days you could use in a semester. Y'all changed that. It had been you could take 2 in a row or something, and then we changed to a limit of 5 per semester, and then if you work 226, 5 in the summer. And I think I'm speaking to the choir on a lot of this because a lot of you were covered under that leave. So that's really the last time it was updated, and I think, I was trying to remember the last time we had someone from TASB here to audit our policy. It's been several years. I don't know if anybody can remember. Were you here, John, when we did that?
If I was, I don't recall.
Okay, so what they did is we came in and you see the policy, and is this what we're doing? Does our practice match the policy? So this has already been good because I did find something that we're doing that is not in our policy. So I had already asked some questions about it, and when Barrett asked me to get this together, I went ahead and I went to TASB and did a survey, and as long as you'll do a survey, you can benefit from what they have gathered from the different school districts. Now, in the school district, I think most of you know, we have state leave, and then you have leave that the local district gives you. So we get 5 state days. As of now, we give 2 local days, and they do not accrue. Plus, we do 20 days of extended sick leave, and we do a catastrophic leave bank. And so when you look through these, for the most part, I think I don't have to explain those. I put those in for information. What do people do? And there's just a vast array. And I even printed off policies. I went to different school districts' websites, printed off everybody's DEC local, and I was really amazed at how different people were. I didn't even know that you could do some of the things, but I had asked. There are people, and I know like me and Pam, that have been here that are historians for the district, and we have amassed a lot of leave and still have it. And you know, if you can't take, of course I don't.
You can't take it with you.
Yeah, you can't take it with you, and you can't use a lot of it. So I had already asked, is there a way we could change policy? Now, I don't know. A lot of this would have to come from lawyers. At retirement time, could you donate your leave? But I don't know if that's something that lawyers would say were legal. We have our catastrophic leave bank that our employees can donate 1 or 2 days, up to 2. I never understood why anyone would do 2, but some people do. And because you're a member if you only donate 1. So, and they can donate a leave day. And we had this year 183 employees that took benefit of that, which kind of surprised me when I looked because I thought more would. But I look at that, and I've always tried to tell employees that's like an insurance policy. You are giving up a day. So we have several charts, and this is only 250 people that responded. So about who gets leave. There's differences in local leave policies, how many days. Some districts give professionals only days and don't give anyone else hourly. So I thought that was quite interesting because I value everyone. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't have everybody is working as a team, but there are a lot of school districts that do that. So you see some of them say sick leave, they stipulate how you can use it. We typically give our 2 local days, and you can use it anywhere way you want, but you only have 1 because of if you donate to catastrophic leave. A lot of districts also have catastrophic or sick leave pools where we have a bank, and each year you give days and they stay in there. There's probably some from when y'all donated. And luckily in the last few years that balance has built up. There were a few years, several years ago, and I think we'll see a historical on that where, you know, we used a lot. But I pray that I never have to use that, but I'm certainly thrilled when somebody has that to use for them. So this TASB survey really gave me the information, wow, there's a lot of different things out there. And so we looked at, or I calculated, we pay a sub about $65 a day, and with benefits, taxes and all, we can round that to about 100. And I did a quick calculation of who needs a sub and who didn't. And for one day, it would cost the district $32,100. That's a very, it's just very general, you know, I didn't put, just going through counting. I do feel like if we decided to change and we gave local days across the board, we would lose time and we will lose instruction. So I don't know how you ever quantify that. So there's just a lot of things you start thinking about. So some districts, and even in our immediate area, let employees accrue local leave, whereas we have to. Most of the time people use them. I was going through our policy a couple of years ago doing the employee handbook, and I told Dana, I said, this policy is wrong because we don't pay for unused personal days. And we do, we still do. But administrators don't get it, so and there's just several groups, professionals, counselors, and librarians that get it. And so we paid for 6 days or portions of days last year. And what we paid them for is at a rate set by the board. And no one can remember the last time that was changed. We would have to look back. But if they don't use their personal day, they get paid $50, which I think that's something that probably, after all of this and looking, and possibly I talked to Barrett about getting a committee together and seeing, you know, what is fiscally sound for us to do. We want to give everyone, we want to do as much as we can, but also, you know, look at different options for us. So anyway, that was interesting that that came up. But so some districts allow you to accrue days. Now, if they pay you for them, you don't accrue them. So there are all different options, and I never would have believed that. Some districts, for the catastrophic leave bank, we only donate local, will allow you to donate state, which I thought maybe there was something legal about that. And no, there's not. So I don't know if when our catastrophic leave bank was made, what the deal is, but I've looked through. I have Belton, China, Clifton, Jonesboro, Hamilton, Lampasas, La Vega, Lorena, Midway, Temple, Robinson, and West. I just pulled those, their DEC. And I was going to try to make something that was clear, have a graph, but they are all so different. It is amazing. So anyway, it's been kind of enlightening that I didn't know so many different things existed for employees. We are one of the only districts, and I would say Midway is the only other one, that offers bereavement leave. We give 5 days for bereavement per year. Midway does 3 per event. So that's a little, you can see even right there, it's hard to compare. Very few do the 20 days extended leave like we do. Some of them do it, but if you are getting disability insurance, that you don't get the 20 days extended leave. So I was talking to Mackenzie about it because she came, you know, sometimes I've always talked to young employees about the benefits of disability insurance. And it is very helpful to people that are going to be out on maternity leave. So we have some of those that do that, and they come out okay. Back when, I can say through the years, I've been doc days twice with the birth of my kids. I took 4 weeks. Now the new mother, that's probably a lot better than I am, take 12. So they do have more days to make up. So I think looking over this is something that we do need to do. And I don't know, I would say, and I can't tell the board what to do, but in thinking about even the reimbursement at $50 a day, that's not even sub-pay. You know, they should get something, or do we decide to accrue them? And different districts allow them to accrue up to different amounts. and then some then buy them back at retirement. So there's just all sorts of things, or retirement anytime you leave the district. So it's something that in going through and looking at employees, I feel like there are some employees that have taught very few years and have a lot of leave built up, mostly at state. But there are a lot of employees that get docked every year. And I don't know, that's just the difference in, you know, there are some things we can't prevent, but I think there are some people that would use every day we gave them. And how does that affect, we have to look at instruction. And I know that I trained some pretty good subs, but the teacher's still better. I'm sorry, Ryan. Ryan subs on Fridays. But I still like having the teacher. So, I know, do you have a question?
Oh, wait a minute.
Okay. Barrett, do you want to go through to the end where it has our catastrophic, that's our policy. Oops, it's all in that direction. That's our DEC local. And our catastrophic leave bank, we allow to be used for family, immediate family as outlined. And I kind of went through and highlighted some different things. Also, one thing that isn't in there is we have started doing a military leave. If you or if your spouse is deployed or returns from service, we give them 2 days within the month that they leave or come back. So we felt like, but that's not in our policy, so that's what's missing. So anyway, and that's what it is right there, but we had a girl in our office that we told about that, and I forgot to tell her, but it's a good thing. I think we have men and women that do a lot for our country, and we need to support them when they come home. So, does anybody have any questions, or would y'all like more information about what we do, or?
How does it work between state days and local days? I don't know anything about it. Or is it the same paid time off, or is it personal time and the state has, what's the difference between that?
When we
And
first,
my question is if an employee was required to take their local personal days first and then use the state days after, what would that do? I don't know. In our policy, we typically, it says unless the employee chooses otherwise. Of course, our local doesn't accrue, state does. So if it were me, I would always use my local first because I want to build the others up. Right.
So all of that is dependent on if we were to decide to accrue local. That would change that dynamic a little bit.
And your state days travel with you if you're...
Yeah, your state days go with you from district to district. Now in the, I think, was it 96? I hate to date myself, but used to we got personal leave and sick leave. Is that correct?
That's true.
And we had to say personal and we had to say sick and describe the illness to get off. But now they're all discretionary and non-discretionary. You can choose to use them, you know, whether it's something like if it's during a time of state testing, we sometimes limit the use of just take off to go shopping, you know, or whatever, depending on what it is. Sometimes we have some that really like to fish and they want to go fishing, and we have some that are nice and they say, oh, they're short on subs, I won't go. You know, they'll come back in there, but now it's just discretionary and non-discretionary. Like if I wake up sick, it goes to non-discretionary, but it's all leave now.
In the modern world, the maternity leave, do we have anything in there for the dad taking off? I don't remember.
FMLA they can take off, but I don't think we have anything where the dad could.
The way I understand it, because we ran into this, a dad's FMLA counts against the moms. So the family, you only get 12 weeks. So, like when we had the boys,
That's if they work for the same
if I took longer than 5 days, then my FMLA would have counted against hers.
I didn't remember
It's
reading
really
that.
crazy how many of these rules.
I know in the modern world, that's the big thing now. Daddy wants off.
Equal rights.
I didn't.
And I know we also had an adoption this year,
I did
which
enough
of
night
course,
duty.
that doesn't qualify for disability because they weren't pregnant, so it made it where it was harder again and cost them more money. So anyway, I had never thought of that too. What a blessing, but you're gonna have to pay for every bit of it.
So when you're looking at all these other districts, where do we fit? Are we similar, or do more districts
And
give more
looking,
days?
and of course, all of y'all, I know, all of y'all know all about policy, but looking at the legal, at the policy and the framework, we offer, it's hard to compare, more different types than most.
You mentioned the bereavement, that we have
Right.
a good bereavement.
Which I hope I never use that.
Yeah.
But when you need it, it's something that's very nice. So we have bereavement, we have the 20-day extended, we have just the 2, but there's a lot that just have 2. Ours don't accrue. And then you get into catastrophic, whether you can give state or local. And like I said, if you lose local, you want to leave it that way. But if local accrues, you may want to choose state, you know. So there are a lot of variables, but we talked about, as far as, Barrett, would you go to the look at the catastrophic leave bank? And of course, all of this would have to go through legal to see what we could do, but there are, this is started in 93, 94, and you can tell, and Dana brought this in after I started questioning, after I talked to Barrett, and she said, well, I started to say something because the last few years we haven't used near the amount that was donated, which is a great thing. And then there are schools that do set a cap on it and say, I'll just tell you what some of them say, and I'm not saying anything that we would have to do this. Like in the last 3 years, if you had donated to catastrophic leave, you will be a member until the balance falls below 500 days. Which, if we could do something like that, would be in effect giving employees that participated, which would only be the 183, another local day, because they would not have to donate that. And that's something that when you look at the balance, and Dana says even this year, 18-19, luckily we haven't had to use that. That's something that I think would be a good thing to do. But see what the wording is that's the most appropriate, and you would, all new employees, if they wanted to participate, would have to donate, but make up some policy that would say we can, until this balance goes below 500 or whatever the number is. Now some have donate 3 days to catastrophic. It's amazing the difference in them.
What about individuals donating some of theirs to a certain person who may need that?
Now that is a leave pool instead of a leave bank. And so that is when an incident occurs, then I say I will donate 10 days to you. And some of them have, you can only donate local days, which wouldn't work with us because we can't accrue them. And then some will allow you to do state. So I don't know what the ramifications are of doing that with state. We would have to check with TASB and everyone else, but these are all in the TASB policy, so I would think it's legal some way, the way they do it. I don't know the difference in a catastrophic leave bank and a leave pool. It seems like ours is there, I don't know, what would be the advantage of one over the other? We limit ours to 30 days. Some do up to 90. So you have to look at every part of it. Now, if you did 90, you may not want to change your, allow it for members in the last so many years to not donate.
So do you think that a committee to discuss all these options would be a valuable thing?
I think so.
Yeah.
And personally, I don't know, I value everyone's opinion.
Right.
I think a cafeteria worker, a maintenance person, everyone needs, and a lot of those people need the same days. They've got kids and all
That's
too.
true.
And I would like to do that. I think we have usually a late year DEIC that maybe we could get one together and talk about that.
Anybody? Are y'all good with that?
I like that
Is that a
idea.
good?
Pleasure.
Can we do that?
Can you explain the bereavement, how it's set up to work? I know it only goes so far down in relation, is that correct?
Yes,
Immediate
and we
family.
have the family definition in ours is, it's immediate family only. Now, we did have, I shouldn't say this, but we did have one that did it wanted bereavement for a dog, and we did not put dogs in there. But we use this same immediate family for catastrophic, a spouse, a son or daughter, including biological, adopted, foster, or a child from whom the employee stands in loco parentis, parent, step-parent, parent-in-law, or other individual, sibling, step-sibling, sibling-in-law, grandparent, and grandchild. I know we have had some questions about grandparent-in-law. You know, my husband's grandmother died, which to me, I don't know, I think that could be considered, but this is one that kind of comes in as standard with insurance or any other person residing in the employee's household. Now, what we typically look at that is an obituary. So, and that's something that even I did when my dad died. I know to bring the obituary. I think I'm thankful for the 5 days. I will prove that that's what occurred. We always also trust the family relationship that's written in the obituary. Sometimes it may not be biological, but if they're listed as a sister, we don't question that. Do you feel like they are your sister and you listed them, then they get immediate family. So,
Marcia, thank you. She's been doing a lot of hard work researching all that. And I think our lens is we want to do whatever we can to help our people. You know, let's try to find out something we can do to help them. And at the same time, though, we just have to be cautious that, of course, there's always a money aspect, but also like what you brought up, Marcia, that if folks use a lot of days, that our kids miss out. And so,
and
but
even like a maintenance person, we don't pay for a sub, but we need those people, and if they're out, something's not getting done. So it's hard to ever measure or quantify what that amount is.
So I think Marcia and I will probably have another DEIC meeting. The DEIC group is the same one that helps us with our calendar and some of the big stuff. And so we'll just pitch this out there to them. And some of this stuff to me, like the membership of the catastrophic leave, since the balance is so big, I think we could give folks that are already in it, they don't have to donate a day next year. That would basically give you a day. And some little things like that. So,
You would
Cindy
support
already
that?
agrees.
I would support that.
Yeah.
It's all over.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I always look at is I'm just so thankful that I haven't had to use it, but know that it's there if something happens.
Very good if you need it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Good job.
Okay, moving on to fine arts updates.
Okay, so this next item is pretty brief, but we've been doing some work in the fine arts area. Jose Sanchez is here tonight to help me present, but last spring he led a series of meetings with fine arts teachers from past and present and did some work on their vision and mission and as a department, what do they want to see in the district, and got together a lot of planning documents, and they really put in a lot of effort, a lot of hard work. And so I kind of tasked Jose again this year with some more things as far as where do we go from there. And he's been working on a handbook for new fine arts teachers and really existing fine arts teachers on just a real practical set of things that they can work on. And so Jose, you want to kind of give them an overview of what you've been doing?
Yeah, so, I sat down with Dr. Pollard, and we kind of started brainstorming about what was the next step in our fine arts department, and kind of an understanding of what we are and who we are and what we want to, add to the district. And one of the first things I said to myself was like, well, as a fine arts person, what is the expectation for myself, and what is the expectation throughout our whole entire program? And when I first came here and it was brought on to Gatesville, which I am very thankful for, I had no clue what the expectations were. Partially just because of the evacuation of the band department, and that's just the way to say it. In that 1 year, 3 band directors had left the band program. We had our choir teacher retire. We had a theater teacher leave as well. So right then and there, we already had 5 vacancies. And it was very much apparent nothing was written down, or there wasn't always just a clear definition of what was expected of, just the band program, or even the choir department, or the theater department. Actually, Miss Bear was actually brand new that year as well, so there's quite a few holes in the fine arts program, and trying to figure out what was the general expectation of each one of those programs was difficult. And so, with as much leadership that Mr. Webb and everyone could give us, there was the whole part of the fine arts department that just operated within themselves, and the communication just wasn't always at its peak. So part of this handbook is actually sitting down and discussing the expectations of each program with that teacher. We sat down with Sharith Wells and Miss Bear and Miss Montoya, and we've all talked about whether or not they have handbooks, what are their performance expectations, and kind of going through that process and understanding like these are the things that are expected of each program and for them to participate. As far as the band program goes, we're expected to participate in UIL, concert and sight reading, solo and ensemble, put on a Christmas concert, put on a spring concert. Those are our recognized activities that we do. And before that, I remember the very crisp moment where I went to Mr. Webb when he was principal, and I asked, I go, okay, what does the band do for homecoming? And we had no clue because Mr. Webb was left out of that situation for the band directors. And so a big part of this document is allowing transparency for the fine arts to everybody else, because once you have transparency to the community, it's a greater understanding to what we're actually trying to achieve for our students. And so there isn't kind of a veil between what the fine arts are and what we're actually trying to do and accomplish for each one of those people. So right now, some of the even basic questions that we've had is how do we get things on Facebook for the ISD and recognize our students, because that's something that we love to do, is that we like to recognize all our students. And so currently also in this document, I'm doing a contact point solution where we have each one of the administrators listed, and I'm actually giving a brief summary of what contact points you have with that. There for the longest time, I did not know that Marsha was actually quite in charge of the Facebook group. So one of the ways I would blast out an email to the ISD, and it would magically appear on the Facebook group, and then I went searching down the rabbit hole, and I found
Well,
that
you wouldn't think, because I have no friends. I don't have a personal Facebook, so I have no friends, but I just do that one. And I have help now.
So, and trying to get to more of those easy communication skills for, fine arts teachers, and because we do a lot of different activities, concerts that are happening, theater productions that are happening, that sometimes we miss the mark because there's a simple breakdown in communication. And as far as giving that a very easy access point to any fine arts administrator is going to be a real huge help to those types of things. And even simple things as, does your program have a handbook within itself?
Those are some questions that we've asked, and I'm going to be sitting down with Ms. Montoya here pretty soon, and we're actually going to start trying to develop a theater one-act play handbook just for her program based off what the choir and I have done with our own programs in order to help give a little bit more structure. And as soon as we develop a better structure within the top levels, because the high school programs are the ones that are most easily visible, we'll start trickling down. So we'll pretty much have a secondary fine arts handbook, and then we'll start working on the elementary level, because really our elementary level is what helps sets the foundation. So as we establish our expectations in the secondary level, that's going to help give us a better vision of how we want to lead our elementary levels of education, fine arts education, as far as art and music education. So that's kind of the current working document.
Jose has taken on a lot of things outside the scope of being just head band director, and so we've tagged him with the title now of Fine Arts Coordinator. And so with that, though, has already come more duties than what I just originally given to him. So he's taking on, you know, looking at fine arts requisitions, and then Dr. Sanderson was gracious enough to let him be the administrator on duty at all fine arts events at night. So he was very excited.
That was good.
Just some. And so Jose's been very gracious in helping us, and we're excited. We needed somebody to help ramrod those things, and like
But
I said,
he didn't come for hamburgers.
No, he didn't. We cooked hamburgers
Coming on
today.
Thursday or Friday.
But,
Thursday and Friday.
but we, our Achilles heel has been having things in writing. And so we've been working really diligently to try to get more things in writing, so when people do go, you know what to do. And so we appreciate your work, Jose. Did y'all have any other questions of him?
You can never leave.
Well, you know, my wife's a band director over at Midway, and we bought our house right outside, in between, and so I plan on staying here for a good while. So, no plans on leaving. So, any other questions?
There was at a time a band student handbook in existence.
Yes, we do have that. That's part of our handbook.
Good deal. And there was a theater student handbook as well.
That is no longer in existence as far as I know.
I can find that for you.
I'd appreciate that.
I'll take care of it.
Good.
Mr. Westbrook, when you were in there, did you need a handbook for you to go by, or was there just kind of a code?
There was a former board member who got a former band director dismissed after a number of years because they didn't have a handbook. And I won't go down that road, but
You got it.
that person certainly thought we needed one. And it was good when we had one. I will say, to your point, they're very clear expectations. When you've got that in there, there are no loopholes. These are the expectations, and this is how we go about meeting them, and this is what the program looks like.
For example, in our current band handbook, it actually gives an explanation of every single activity and that the requirement of our students. So therefore, when we have students that ask questions, and even it has course descriptions in it. So like earlier this year, we had a student that's in one of our courses that did not read the handbook completely. And when they missed an event, they didn't understand why they were having to do a different performance in order to make up for that event. And we pulled up the handbook and we explained to the, and the parent signs the handbook as well as our student. So that way it's almost like a contractual obligation. And that's an important thing for our students to understand, is that when you sign a contract and when you make a commitment to this thing, that they have to follow through, and that's a big part of what we do. It's the same way currently we're doing leadership applications for the band program, and one of the things I have my students do is a few different things. Is actually we have them make resumes, and I have sophomores starting to make resumes, and they ask me the question. They ask me, why do I have to make a resume? I go, well, you want to work somewhere one day, don't you? I go, might as well get to practice now. And versus later. And then we also have them do a service project that is in direct relation to either the band program or Gatesville ISD. This past year, we had a student, Lauren McCracken, that repainted all the benches at the elementary, or the primary, because our whole entire goal is that we appreciate where we're from, and we need to give back to where we're from to better understand who we are. And so that's something that is in our leadership kind of handbook as well, because our leadership team is selected and it's auditioned, and so now they understand their clear expectations of how they hold themselves as representations of the ISD as well as the band program.
Very good. Teaching them to be leaders. Something my dad told me whenever I was growing up, he goes, I have one job, and my job is to, as a parent, is to produce a responsible and well-functioning member of society. And if I can't do that, then I have failed at my job. And I don't currently have any children. My wife is trying to sway that the other direction. And so I had a leadership meeting today, and I told them I currently don't have any children, so therefore you are my children by proxy, and my job is to make you functional human beings in society and to contribute to society, and our society is Gatesville ISD. And so you need to contribute to them in that way to be functional human beings. And so that's a big standpoint on a lot of the handbook stuff that we're trying to do, and those clear expectations through fine arts. Very good.
I believe your dad did a good job.
I'm not saying he did. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shane?
Good evening. Well, this is just information only, but just wanted to give you guys a heads up kind of where we are. Each year, the state calls for a proclamation for new instructional materials for different subjects and grade levels. And so Proclamation 2019 calls for instructional materials for English, language arts, and reading grades K through 8. Spellings grades 1 through 6, and handwriting grades K through 5, and English language arts 7 through 8. And so just kind of looking at the process we've gone through is just, right now, K through 6, we want to make sure everything we do is aligned. And so we've been doing the BAS assessment for the past few years, and the level of literacy intervention for our struggling readers. And so looking at K through 6, we're really wanting, after review from teachers and administrators, we had an adoption review the Friday before spring break. And we're really looking at Fountas Monell Classroom, which has lots of good reading materials, writing, spelling, phonics, a lot of good information that we really want to consider look at purchasing for next school year. They also reviewed K through 5 handwriting, and we looked at 2 different options, Zaner Bloser and Handwriting Without Tears. And teachers by far, hands down, really like the Zaner Bloser handwriting pieces. And currently we're still under review for grades 7 and 8, but it's a pretty hefty price tag when it comes to this is probably the largest adoption of instructional materials that we will have in the coming years when you're looking at K through 8 ELAR. So we're looking at a price tag of around $300,000 to $400,000, but we use those funds as our IMA funds that we receive from the state every biennium. And so we have some money left for the rest of the school year, and we'll get our new funds sometime in July or August. And so September, so sometime at that point, but that's kind of where we are right now. And so we'll request the materials through EMAT, and the state will approve that for us to spend those funds and to order those materials. Does anybody have any questions?
What is our IMA?
What is our amount right now?
Yeah.
What do we have
Where do
left?
we have, what was our last?
You remember somewhere around 500,000 maybe?
Well,
What was that?
yeah, for the 2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we still have probably 3.
I think we're about last I checked, it was 293.
293.
With all funds we have to spend right now is about $360,000. And then, we'll probably use a portion of our new funds to get some other things that we really want at the beginning. So, the Fountas Monell Classroom editions, they don't come with the guided reading pieces. That's the piece that's left out. That's the piece that teachers really like to have. And so we would like to get that piece when our new funds are released.
Books are expensive.
Very expensive.
Very expensive. And to get this good
Funding comes from where? This is
It comes from the state of Texas. So they used to send you your books, and that's what you use, but now they release the money to you, and you spend the money how you see fit.
And they're yours when it's done.
And they're yours.
Yes. Comes to schools too, not the states.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask this question, and I may be totally off, but you're talking about the balance. Now, the way I read it, this adoption coming up comes out of EMAT or MCAT now, or what it is, next year.
I think you can float some.
I think you can do it either way.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you have the balance, but if you're short,
You can
I
use
think
some
the
for next
publishers are gonna hold off billing until
Correct.
September
If-
1.
if-
So you're getting next year's funding added to what we already have in place. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, you're right, Mr. Alderson. So many of the sales reps that I've been talking to have said that they would bill us, we could go ahead and order, and then they would bill us when we get our new
Well, they
funds.
better, because where I'm at, I've got it down to $200. So, but that's what I understood, that we're gonna be billed starting September 1.
Correct, so we could go ahead and finish, use what we have, and then anything we don't, if we need to float something, the sales reps are gonna let us, the companies will let us float.
And then we've got to buy 9 through 12 ELAR.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of this, is it computer generated stuff?
No, this is not. The Fountain Spinell K through 6 classroom has a lot of interactive read alouds. It has mini lessons and actual books that students can read. And there is an online component for teachers to pull resources from. So there's a little bit of both, but it's mainly in-hand materials.
Which really is the question I wanted to ask. Where does the district stand as far as having computers, say, for all of our kids in the lower grades? So
I'd
each
say-
student has a computer.
We continue to add computers. Like right now, we're about to order some for elementary through their comprehensive grant that they have. The junior high is about to get through the Gear Up grant. Cindy,
Yes,
four Chrome carts additional to what they already have, and then we have additional funds from the Education Foundation for about $21,000 that we have to spend also. So we're slowly getting saturated to where we
Personally,
have.
I'd like to see a computer for every kid in the district.
I think right
Because I mean,
now,
that's where society's headed.
yeah, right now,
We're getting closer and closer.
K to 12, I'd say there's probably 3 kids to every Chromebook, but I think soon it'll be 2 to 1. 2 kids to 1 Chromebook. So we're naturally going to 1 to 1.
So I think for elementary, we're about to order 3 carts of 22, 23. They're getting 100 Chromebooks for junior high here coming up, and then we have enough from the Education Foundation to probably buy another 2 or 3 carts also, which is about 25 per cart.
And we need computers.
Yeah.
So, all right, so we will look to, EMAT's closed down from April 1st to May 1st, so we'll start to get that process rolling and start getting some things ordered.
Shane, you're still up.
I guess I'm gonna stay.
You can do part 2 of your.
All right, part 2. Okay, now this is an action item. Make sure this is on T certification. Okay. All right, so each year, districts are required to certify annually to the State Board of Education, the commissioner, that for each subject in the required curriculum other than PE, students have access to instructional materials that cover all the TEKS. And so this is just a form that the district superintendent and the Board of Trustees certify that the district's instructional materials allotment, which is the IMA fund, the money that the state gives us, is used only for expenses allowed by Texas Education Code for the current school year. And I guess what I'm doing is I'm recommending that the superintendent, local board president, board secretary sign the instructional materials allotment and TEKS certification form so that we may submit it to TEA. And then once we have this form submitted, then we can begin ordering our instructional materials. We can't begin ordering for the new year until this form is submitted.
Okay, You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
John, second. Linda? Any discussion? Anything else? All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries.
All right,
Thank you,
guys.
Mr. Webb.
So we can submit that, if you guys will sign that, and I'll get that sent off this week.
And now you're up again.
These are really quick ones, so. Okay, the next one is a credit by examination audit process, and this is a board resolution. So we just got a new legal update from, is that right, from TASB, Marcy, where we had to,
Update 112.
we had to have, this is just an update. And so, State Board of Education really recently approved revised rules on credit by examination that include a new requirement for districts and assessment providers to audit their credit by exam assessments. And says the district Board of Trustees must approve the audit process for credit by exams used for kindergarten through grade 5 acceleration in all district developed assessments. And so right now we currently use Texas Tech or the University of Texas for our credit by exams. A long time ago we used to use district created assessments, but we've moved away from that, and we now have used one of those two universities for our credit by exams. And so we're just saying that those exams, we're going to use their audit process for those exams. And so I'm recommending that the Board of Trustees approve the audit process used by the University of Texas at Austin and Texas Tech University for credit by examinations used for kindergarten through grade 5 acceleration. Does anybody have any questions about credit by exams or?
So are you saying they can take a test and get credit for that course?
Correct, or to advance a grade level, or they can take a test and they pass the test. We order the test through the University of Texas or Texas Tech. They send us the test. We give them the test. We send it back to Texas Tech or University of Texas. They grade it. If they receive a passing score, then they receive credit for that course.
This is K through 5.
This is grade K through 5, but we also use it. We only have to have the audit process for grades K through 5, but we use it 6 through 12 also.
Okay.
Matter of fact, we do give exams for those upper grades we give.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion? Cheyenne, second? I'll second. Okay. All those, any discussion, any more discussion?
How many do y'all do with these?
Not very often. Sometimes really the ones that I give the most are for Spanish. So if I have some Spanish speakers that are not sitting in the dual credit. So we've given some Spanish 1, some Spanish 2. We've done some Algebra 1, some English. So it's not often. We have 4 testing windows a year for a kid to they sign a form to say that they want to test out of a certain subject or grade level. And once we receive that form, we order the test and then we give them the test.
That's good. Anybody else? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Thank you, guys.
Mr. Harper.
The next 2 items work in tandem in strengthening our drug deterrence in the district. And the first one is the contract with Interquest Canine Detections. And we want to continue to contract with them. These are the canines that can detect multiple things, not just drugs, but alcohol, ammunitions, gunpowder, things of that nature. And so the first action item is that we approve and continue I recommend we continue services with Intercrest as presented throughout the 2019-2020 school year. It's 14 half-day visits with a trainer, a handler, and a dog to come in and sniff for contraband.
How does that compare with the dogs the sheriff's office has?
The sheriff's office is narcotics mainly, and so there's five main strands of narcotics that they're trained for. And so they're not sniffing for alcohol or ammunition, gunpowder. They're strictly narcotics dogs. And so the next action item is to have a memorandum of understanding with the Sheriff's Office to support and to increase the number of searches that we can have on our campuses.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
David and Charles, any more questions? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries.
The second item is the memorandum of understanding with the Sheriff's Office to use their narcotics dogs. This is something that they have 2 dogs and 2 handlers that have been trained to work in a school setting. They go out to Cove, and they would also come and work in our district as well. They'll get a calendar just like the InterQuest will have a calendar. They'll pick the days. It'll be totally random. We won't know whenever they're coming, but they're strictly narcotics dogs. And so the sheriff's officers and their handlers will come in and conduct the same type of searches that we've been used to doing with InterQuest. And so I recommend our district approve the memorandum of understanding as it appears before the board.
Is there a motion for this recommendation? Rob, second? Who was that? David? Any questions?
This is at no cost to the district, correct?
Correct.
And the other one was the same, I don't know if we already approved it, but is it the same rate or did it go up $5 or $10?
Yeah, it went up $10.
$10.
Same parameters from the sheriff's office as far as interaction with kids and
Yes, the
property.
same procedure that we're going to go with. Now, we haven't used the team yet, and so having them come in, we're going to have some initial runs and run them through classrooms, run them through the parking lot. What is that? How long will that take their dogs to go through that? So we'll have those initial things to kind of give us an idea of what that's going to be like for the day that they do come in on just a random basis.
Things are quick. They're impressive. Man, we have. Never mind. It doesn't do with this. We'll start chasing rabbits.
They're smart animals.
They are. It is. Yeah, man. They can from a dead run and run past them.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Harper. We will be moving into executive session. Okay, I'm going to Texas Government Code 551.001 and 551.074. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank y'all. We'll be going down the hall.